Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Yakov Darling Khan. So Yakov is one of the co-founders of Movement Medicine. He will tell us more about that. If you listen to the show with David from Ireland, that's similar to the same tradition. He has a strong shamanic background, so I'm looking forward to learning more about that, something I don't know much about. Studied with shamans from all over the world. Did a long apprenticeship with Gabriel Roth for 5 Rhythms. So Yakov, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. And hi to you and to all the people tuning in. Good to be with you.
Where are you joining us from? Is it the West Country, I think you're based, isn't it?
I'm right down in the southwest of the UK on the edge of Dartmoor. Yeah, looking out my window, right on the edge of winter and spring we are here. Just those buds full of life, ready to pop.
I went for a walk this morning and I have an early morning 12-step meeting at 7:30 and it was light for the first time in a while when I walked there. And then the sort of sun shining on the way out, and it's still cold though. It's that sort of turning point, isn't it, right now?
Definitely, yeah. You can feel it in the blood and in the bones, but yeah, you still got to wrap up in the morning.
So let's dive in. How did you get interested in this work? Like, what was your route into working with the body?
Well, I had a bit of a shock. I was playing golf actually. This was when I was 22 years old. I was playing golf in the East End of London, a golf course with a friend of mine, and a big storm came over. And I don't really know why, but we put up an umbrella. I was holding the umbrella. He was standing next to me. It was raining cats and dogs, really raining. And then all of a sudden, he got thrown off me, and I felt like I was doing an impersonation of a tent peg, just being bashed into the ground. And I was like, oh my God, we just got hit by lightning. It was a real illuminating, shocking experience. I was standing there going, God, I could be dead. It's kind of amazing. I'm not. I'm here. I feel my heart beating. I think I'm still alive. And almost in that moment, the kind of experiences that I used to have as a kid, they kind of came rushing back. It was a bit like drawing a curtain, and things that I'd put to one side in order to fit in as a teenager, in order to just be part of the crowd, they all came rushing back. And I realized, I had to try and find out something about all this stuff. And working with the body had really been my way of surviving. As a teenager, I'd been really physically active. I'd been into sport. I'd been into football and hockey, just anything that was really physical, where I could express myself and let all of that teenage energy move in a strong way. So sport had really helped me, but it was not the same at all as working with the body in a conscious way. And not long after being hit by lightning, I met Gabriel Roth, and I discovered, not just through her but through other people, that there was such a thing as shamanism. And the more I looked into that, I realized that it was the first thing that actually made sense of my experience. And I was really relieved to discover that there were people all around the world throughout all time who'd had similar kinds of experiences to me. So I started to feel slightly less on the edge and realized that there was something to study and get hold of. So that's how it began for me.
Wonderful. So enlightenment on a golf course. Remarkably common, I've heard, to get hit by lightning on a golf course. It seems to be something. Yeah, I've heard quite a few stories of that. And so let's define shamanism then. It's something people might have some vague idea about. What is that? What is shamanism?
Well, interesting. The best definition I ever heard was from somebody called Mircea Eliade, who described shamans as technicians of ecstasy. A shaman is somebody, in my experience, who through their own wounding, through their own trauma, through their own challenge, their own difficulties about being a human being in a body living on earth, through the specific difficulties of growing up within their own culture, and often through illness or shock or some kind of change of life that can be quite traumatic, gets thrown into what you would have to describe as a healing crisis, where they recognize that the things that happen to them are very much part of their life in the present, and they're not there in a positive way. They're there like there's a huge road blockage, and they do the work then of through their own healing of mapping the journey back to a more soulful life, to a life where who they really are, rather than who they think they ought to be, who we really are rather than who we think we ought to be, becomes the focus, and who we are and the possibility we have to make that our offering. So shamans have taken that journey, and they've done it. So Gabrielle, who we mentioned already, who was my teacher for 18 years and who created this body of work called the 5 Rhythms, she used to say that shamanism is indigenous to its own culture. That means that though we can learn a lot from shamans from other culture, and I certainly have, in the end, you have to translate that, what you've received, into your own experience. Because, you know, an Amazonian shaman may be absolutely brilliant, may be a master of a particular way of understanding working with plants and learning how to have a vision in the forest, but they don't have the experience of growing up in the industrial world and the challenges that brings. So they may not be able to understand quite what your experience has been. And indeed, I think that's the source of quite a lot of problems in modern day shamanism.
Yeah. I'm glad we've got into culture. Obviously, it's one of the themes of the show, you know, such international speakers and audience. Yeah. I've come across, you know, people into shamanism. I had friends that kind of follow different paths, and it seems to be quite diverse. You know, the Native American ones, Siberian ones, Amazonian ones, some using drugs, some using dancing. Obviously, we'll get into that subject. You know, there seems to be some commonalities across these cultures. And also, I also see quite a lot of people sticking feathers up their arse and pretending to be chickens, like the kind of, you know what I mean? Like the cultural dressing up that can happen, you know, like people, you know, I had a friend the other day say, well, the white man says this. And I was like, hang on a minute, you're a white man. I am. Like, what are you talking about? You grew up in Dagenham. You know, it was just a bit odd that he was talking like a kind of Native American from a Western movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a really wonderful woman who's worked in her whole professional life in issues of diversity and culture, and she's an Asian Indian American, US American, and she described some of our work as white people going tribal.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair comment, to be honest. Unfortunately, it is the work we do. It's absolutely open, and you know, we do have a diverse range of people working with us. But sure, the majority of the people that work with us tend to be white, and they tend to be people who are looking for what we've lost as a culture. Because what happened to the Native Americans when the European colonialists went over there, and the church, and the destruction of culture, the complete disregard for what was sacred to the people there, and the imposition of a European Christian idea of what sacred is, and these poor savages, they need to be saved by us enlightened white people, was the dominant story of the time. But if you look back at those people who went over, their grandparents, their great-grandparents had the same thing done to them by the church. Through, you know, our shamanic roots in the West, and were deeply attacked over centuries and centuries. What I mean by that is shamanism, you know, in shamanism, you don't require a shaman to have a shamanic experience. You don't require a shaman to be able to feel the life force energy of the earth underneath you, or the warmth of the sun, or the power of the waters. You don't need an intermediary. And so shamanism in its nature is very empowering of the individual in the context of community. And you know, the history we have with that, the church came in and said, no, what you need is you need a priest, you need this book, and you need this story in order to live a good life. And if you live according to this book, then maybe later on in another life somewhere else, you'll get your reward, which as far as I'm concerned is the greatest con trick ever played on humanity, the most disempowering, an attack on our embodiment, on our sensuality, on our sexuality, on our power as human beings. Oh no, that's all bad stuff. That's all the bad stuff. You need to do the good stuff.
It struck me it never quite worked though, did it? Like I, people might be, even from the States, might be surprised. Like I grew up in a rural farming village, and there were clear pagan traditions, like the maypole, for example, dancing.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to go far in England before you see a white man or white horse scratched on a hillside. Those pagan traditions are still there. They're not far under the surface. And I imagine there's a sort of connection between those and the shamans of the kind of Western Europe. They never quite went away.
No, they never went away. They're in the land. They're in the rocks. They're in the trees. Shamans are basically, they know nature inside themselves. They know themselves as part of nature. And that's not just a pretty thing. Nature is a wild and destructive force at times. They know the power of nature. And, I agree with you that they didn't succeed in wiping out those traditions, but they did do a very good job in basically helping most of the people that I know and work with grow up with a lot of shame about their bodies, grow up with a lot of shame about their sexuality, grow up with all kinds of strange ideas about the body. And in our culture, I've heard it described that the body is a vehicle to get the head from one meeting to the next.
The brain taxi.
Exactly. We don't have a really good relationship with our physical bodies. And I'd say that was a victory of that particular story. And it's part of the reason why we suffer so much, I reckon, as a species these days, and why we're causing so much suffering as well.
Yeah, I think there's one story that I could buy that you're telling, which is sort of like, it's basically a sort of evil pathology that was imposed on us. Another story is actually it's a developmental step. So I feel like there is a second possibility of sort of saying that. And, I certainly think like idealizing shamanic cultures is also a little bit of a problem. Like it feels to me like this, the shadow of these these native savages know nothing. The shadow of that is they're amazing, they know everything, and denying the fact that, there was huge amounts of human sacrifice, for example, in Native America. Like there's this shadow side in idealizing those people, the noble savage, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be ridiculous to idealize any one thing as being the answer to all ills. And I think the reason to name the suffering that was done in the name of enlightenment is just because it needs to be named, because it still has an effect. But it's not to say, I might well agree with you that we are evolving. And I certainly hope we're evolving. And I absolutely agree with you with the dangers of somehow saying that shamanism is the answer, or that indigenous shamans are perfect. We go to the Amazon rainforest every year. We work with the Achua people and the Zapara people in Ecuador. And whilst they're very wise in ways that we're not, if you put them in our culture and put them, there are ways in which we are children, like them being adults and mature and knowing. If you put me in the Amazon rainforest and take me off a path and spin me around for an hour and then leave me there, I'm not going to survive very long. Leave them there, they'll be fine. They know exactly what to do. They grew up in that environment. They've got a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge, but it doesn't make them perfect people. They have a lot of trouble, a lot of issues. They argue. They were fighting each other until 40, 50 years ago. The average life expectancy of a young man was 35, because normally they die in battle with a neighboring tribe.
Yeah, and the murder rates of a lot of Amazonian tribes. I mean, the highest murder rate ever recorded was a tribe in the west coast of in California, essentially, which is hilarious. And the second highest one was in the Amazon. That's been highest murder rates ever recorded. So I mean, we can't idealize them. And as you say, there's still a lot to learn there. So what is the shamanic view of the body then? Like, is there such a thing? Is there many shamanic views of the body? What is the shamanic view of the body?
Well, I mean, I couldn't say the shamanic view, but what I've understood in terms of growing up in this culture and recognizing how distant we are from a capacity to listen to our own bodies, to to recognize what this material is, that it's been around for 14 billion years. It's learned a thing or two in that time. It has a particular language. And so the body by itself is not enough. You need the body, you need your kinesthetic intelligence, you need your emotional intelligence, and you need your mental intelligence. Bring them together, these three styles, if you like, of intelligence, and then you have somebody who has a chance of being connected to something that you might call the power of soul, or their unique connected individual expression of life. So body is, the language of body is a lot to do with animal instinct. It's a lot to do with taking care of basics. It's a lot to do with a sense of belonging, of connection. Like if I'm not in my body, if I'm not physically present, like if I can't feel my feet on the ground, then I'm not connected to the ground underneath my feet. So it's, we mentioned that spring is coming. If you stand next to a tree at this time of year and put your mind in your feet and just step into that experience of tree life for a moment and feel the power of life returning, that's, rising in those roots, that's popping those buds up in the branches. It's an enormous force. It's an incredible resource. It's a power that's beyond so much. I never worry about us destroying the earth. I worry about us destroying ourselves as a species. I worry about what we do to other species. But the earth is, in my experience, is such a force. If we don't get it together to listen to our bodies and to listen to the earth body, because that's the point. If we're not in our own bodies, we don't recognize that what we're doing to the earth has an effect on us.
Yeah.
We don't recognize that. We don't recognize that link.
Yeah.
And if we've lost that link, we've lost our connection to the earth, and then we end up in the situation we're in, which I agree with you, has enormous potential. Yet, I think we've created a massive crisis because human beings only tend to wake up when we're in crisis, when we have to.
And I think I agree with you on what I'm hearing as sort of this directional link between the environment and the body, and that the more disconnected we are from ourselves, the more disconnected we are from the planet. Like, even if that might sound abstract, but it might just be not noticing the sun on my face in the morning, or noticing that I feel different in spring or whatever it is. And then also vice versa. By, my experience, I was coaching someone yesterday, and they're saying, how do I get embodied? And one of the things I gave them a task to do since my last coaching session is a guy who works at computers said, spend an hour a day outside, just walk in the park. He says, I live in Boston. I said, well, then you'll feel cold. Great. That's not a problem. So it's like connecting to the sort of being outside and being in nature, whatever that means, is just definitely seems to be embodying as well. So there's a sort of bi-directional link there. Is that fairly aligned with your understanding?
Absolutely. And it goes even deeper than that. If I'm not aware of the living earth under my feet, if I'm not aware of the warmth of the sun on my face, I'm not aware of what life is giving me.
Yeah.
And then I'm living this story of lack, hunger. There's something wrong with me. There's something missing in me. There's something that, if I don't get this next bit of technology or this next upgrade or I don't do this next spiritual workshop, then somehow there's something wrong with me. There's a lack. And, that comes from not being in good relationship with the body and recognizing that this body is receiving the power of life, is receiving the gift of life every second that the heart beats. And that's a tangible, felt experience when we bring our consciousness into the bones, into the muscles, into the fluid of who we are, into the fire. We're all solar powered beings. It's a simple physical fact.
Yeah, it's hugely resourcing, isn't it? Like, I sometimes like to just take a breath and be like, wow, I'm being, first of all, the interconnectedness, I'm being gifted this from a tree,
Yeah.
somewhere in the world where algae or whatever, the photosynthesis comes from. And it's like, wow, I literally can't survive I'll be brain dead in 3 minutes without this. And then breathing out and being like, not only do I say thank you, I give something back, which is, actually then breathed in by the tree. So, or I just walked, I was in the park the other day, I just had an urge to, interconnect. So I had an urge to touch a tree as I walked past. And I don't know why, but I did. And I just felt like I needed something solid. Like my day was all over the place. And I put my hand on this big oak tree just for maybe like 5 seconds. I didn't hug it. And it just kind of made me go, yeah, okay, today's going to be okay. I just needed that. And another day it might be looking at the clouds to dream, like there's all that resourcing that's just there, isn't it?
Well, I'm an unashamed tree hugger. I have no shame about that. I hug trees all the time. It's just, for me, if I put my arms around a tree and you just feel that force of life, it's incredible to feel that rooted and that connected to the sky. And it's such a wonderful cliche, isn't it? That people who might be into shamanism are a bunch of wool knitting, tree hugging, vegans. It's we these cliches are not based on nothing. But in the end, I just decided I really don't care. We reached a point in this life where actually seeing somebody hugging a tree, it's like you kind of think, well, they're probably a bit crazy, but you'd probably just leave them to it. And
there's worse things. I'm not hurting anyone. And in some ways, I think it is common sense. Like when people are really upset, for example, they fall to the ground. Like everybody, you talk about tree hugging or ground hugging. I love to lie on the ground with my belly down, especially when life's a bit chaotic. And again, they need that solidness, or when they want to dream, they lie up and look at the clouds. I mean, these are totally universal, normal. If you saw someone in grief and they fell to the floor, you wouldn't think that was strange. Or if you saw someone with a lover daydreaming, looking at the flowers, you wouldn't think that was strange. I mean, these are very normal things to do.
Well, the intelligence that lives the body, that intelligence that's beating the heart, that's replacing the cells, that, we don't have to think about. If we really thought that the rational part of our intelligence was really in charge of life, and it had to take over all the automatic functions of the body, we last about 10 seconds. There is an intelligence in the body that is life living itself, that is also in movement, life is movement. And that's, Gabrielle used to say, the only difference, it's a bit of an obvious statement, that the only difference between a living body and a dead body is movement. And, so you could say life is movement. And, that's our work is all about helping people, not to be good dancers. That's a kind of byproduct that you kind of start to feel comfortable that, at those totally embarrassing moments at parties where people have to, you have to dance. And I used to hate those moments. I used to hate dancing. I used to feel incredibly self-conscious. And, I actually only ended up at a Gabrielle Roth workshop by mistake. I kind of wiped out the whole part of the write-up that was about dance and put my focus on all of it that was to do with shamanism. And I ended up in a room with a bunch of people wearing leotards and stretching. And I was like, what the hell have I got myself into? I've got to dance this whole weekend. I was hiding in the corner feeling like, planning my escape for the first hour.
Yeah, well, the average British bloke, that's not a big part of our kind of cultural heritage in the way of some. So let's take a step back here. So the sort of whole conscious dance thing, Gabrielle Roth, it might be familiar to listeners, but it might not. So, like, what are we talking about here? So you're not talking about dance like drunk at a party or a nightclub. Like, let's start, get everyone in the same place kind of thing. And then I'd love to hear a little bit about movement medicine as a particular methodology within that.
Well, I tend to call it more unconscious dance. So I think it's more accurate. It's actually where we begin. So it's basically shifting our attention from thinking about what we're doing to being in the experience of moving. And so unconscious dance practice is about the capacity we all have to give our physical body back to the beat. It's completely natural to all of us to do that, even though some of us may feel more distant from that. it's actually very, very close. Like you said, you know, the church didn't succeed with destroying shamanism. It's there in the ground. The same, our relationship to the power of movement and the power of life, the intelligence of life, is not that far away. In my own experience, it took 10 minutes for me to shift from being self-conscious and concerned entirely about what I was doing and what people might be thinking about me, and was I doing it right, and was it the good thing or the bad thing, and all of that internal dialogue that's such a distraction from life. It took 10 minutes for Gabrielle to seduce me into a much more interesting place, which was the physical experience of what was happening in my body as I let it be moved by rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, Gabrielle tells this great story of a sort of uptight lawyer coming to watch a class, and they sort of want to hate it, but after a few minutes, their foot's tapping, and they haven't noticed their foot's tapping. Yeah. You know, they're not aware of it, but their body is wanting to get on the time. They're wanting the rhythm to start happening.
Yeah. Well, I think we all long to let go, you know, and, you know, that I understand why people want to use drugs and alcohol to let go. It's, you know, if we've been brought up with so much self-consciousness, and, you know, as I had, and we feel that embarrassment, alcohol, drugs could sometimes get us over that, and they get us into a point. You know, you look at the whole rave scene in the 80s and 90s in UK and Europe, and how many people, young men as well as young women and just human beings, got back into dancing. And yeah, they were trashed for most of the week as a result. But nevertheless, they had an experience. They remembered being part of a bigger picture, like the joy of being really physical, like sweating, moving all night, not it being part of a bigger picture, feeling a sense of connection to something greater. And this experience it's as old as the stones for human beings. We've always found ways to let go and to shift our attention from our everyday concerns back into a place where we start to feel and sense ourselves as connected to a bigger picture, like where I come from, what matters to me, what am I living for, what's the things that, you know, I really care about, what am I part of, what do I belong to, what's my connection to the mystery of life. These things, when we dance really deep, and it doesn't take long. As I said, it took me 10 minutes to get over that self-consciousness and realize that this material knew how to do it. It was only this kind of being worried about, you know, God, this looks weird. And it does look weird. If you look at it from the outside and you watch people doing all of their expression and letting go, and you're not connected to it, yeah, it looks pretty strange, really. It's like, because it's not really a spectator sport. You know?
No, it's not a thing to look at. Is that we occasionally use witnesses in these kind of things, you know, but it's not. It's spectating, as it were. I was dancing last night, actually. There's a beautiful fire rhythms class in a 1,000-year-old church that was a pagan site previous to that, and we've been dancing in there for a few years now. It almost feels like we're sort of healing some of this rift that we were talking about earlier between the traditions. And you know, I find the first few minutes I'm sort of disembodied, so it helps me get in my body just to move. It helps loosen up physical injuries. Psychologically, it helps me let go of resentments. And, you know, I always have my most creative ideas afterwards. I feel like I've done a year of therapy after each time. You know, I just feel happier, more peaceful. Then I might get playful once I've connected to myself. I might get playful, and there's a sense of community with people I know there. I mean, I get a lot of benefits from it. I mean, is what I'm talking about pretty typical for people that are in this?
I think, I mean, it's a beautiful, I'm pleased this is recorded. That was a beautiful description of the benefit of this kind of movement practice, and actually how simple that is. It's not complicated. You don't have to go in there and learn a whole lot of steps, and you can gain access to that condition pretty quickly and pretty easily, in fact. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful description of what's available. And, you know, even then, you know, that's like you might say that would be like a weekly, or you know, some people do their practice daily. When I started working with the 5 rhythms, it was 1988. And there was no such thing as conscious dance. Nobody had ever heard of it. And the first workshop I was in with Gabrielle Roth, there was 18 of us. And that was a big event. And
it's still not everybody has, like, it's still a little bit underground, like even in Brighton and Totnes, you know, like there's regularly I see people in the class I was in last night going, wow, I've just heard of this, I had no idea it existed. And, you know, even let's say there's 30 people there last night, or, you know, some of the bigger dances in London, there might be 200, but that ain't a lot of people. It's still pretty underground.
It's very underground. And, you know, I think we are the people who hold those kind of spaces. We got a creative issue on our hands. I often hear people saying, oh God, there's so many different conscious dance practices. There's so many classes happening, you know, I can't get people to my classes. And I'm going, hold on a minute. There's 7 billion people in the world, and most of them could benefit from a good dance. The problem here is our communication. Yeah. We're not communicating. We're not finding the language to speak to people and explain to them in a very basic and down-to-earth sense why this might be a benefit.
Yeah, the benefits. I just put this out there because I know a little bit about business and marketing, and I've been relatively, you know, successful in what I do. And I just look at the flyers in a 5 Rhythms class that are laid out for all the classes. And as a business person, I just go, what are you selling? Like, what is the benefit here? Now, and I know on another level, it's, you know, you can say, well, it's not really about business, blah, blah, but things have to be appealing. They have to be in a package which makes, like, why would I spend my time and money here? You know, I think there can be an off-putting language and sort of new agey kind of vibe that just isn't going to work for most people.
Well, you know, it works for the people who are into it, but it's not going to break out the scene. And, you know, we've been doing this for 30 years. And you know, most of the 5 Rhythms teachers that came into being had done quite a lot of work with us over the years. And we've seen this spread from, you know, really tiny to at least something that you could describe as underground. Yeah. And now it's starting to make its way into prisons, into hospitals. Yeah. My wife Anna's just done a piece of work with the NHS through the King's Fund, where we have an apprentice who's offering movement medicine in pretty hardcore prison situations. This is starting to find its way into other structures.
And the idea, if I can just jump in, the idea that dance can be transcendent, which lots of people discovered in the rave scene, we had a guy called Nick Jankel talking about that, has become more common. So even though, you know, 5 Rhythms or other practices may be still fairly underground, like, for example, the morning, Sam Mayo, a friend of mine, invented this morning rave thing in London. And just implicit in that is the sense that there can be something transcendent in dance. That the younger generation who are dancing, that's just normal for them to have that idea, even if they don't want to be with their old hippie mum in Totnes dancing, you know. So it's you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that idea has spread in the culture, and it's fantastic to hear that people are taking this into places like prisons.
Yeah, it's, you know, that, you know, it was always our intention that we want this work to be available where in the places where it's needed. And, you know, a great deal of the places where it's needed, those people are never going to make it to a workshop environment or a class. There's just not. It's, you know, there's no way. So therefore, we have to find ways of and packages. And I agree with you. I think marketing, you know, it's all about intention. If our intention is to spread some good medicine, and we think this is good medicine, then we want to use all the tools available to us, and, you know, language and marketing and Facebook and social media and all of these things to get our work out there and to reach people. If it's not visible, then it's not going to reach people. And, you know, I'm very ambitious about the impact I want to have while I'm still here.
Well, I'm very happy to help anyone listening to this who's kind of, you know, interested in how that might be, because I've been translating embodiment to a business environment for many years, you know, and there's some real advantages to that in terms of reaching people and getting paid well and things like that. And I just feel like the sort of the time of kind of just it being all these things being a minority, like trickle down spirituality hasn't really worked. and these things need to go mainstream. And in many ways, I think dance is maybe a bigger ask than, say, yoga, where people can be on their mat on their own, being told what to do, and they get a nice buzz from it. And do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like dance is a sort of bigger, a more profound practice in many ways. Obviously, it depends what we're doing, but
you're absolutely right. It's easier to be told, okay, put your hands in the air and breathe in, and then put your hands down and breathe out, than it is to say, okay, let your hands move with the rhythm.
Yeah, listen to your body.
Yeah. These are, and so we have to find ways of, Gabrielle used to use the word seducing, and she didn't mean sexually, but she did mean seduce people into their own creativity. And this is, movement medicine is it's the work that it took us around 20 years to develop this, and it's the fusion of all the studying we did, including the work we did with running Gabrielle's school in Europe for 10 years, including all the different shamanic studies we've done, including Susanna as a Gestalt psychotherapist. We studied systems theory. We worked with the Pachamama Alliance and the Awakening, the Dreamer Symposium, which is all about recognizing the connection between spiritual fulfillment, environmental sustainability, and social justice, which is a very important part of our work. So movement medicine is the fusion of all the things that we had been working with into a form which is basically through the body, working with people to engage their creativity, to recognize their own creativity, and not just their creativity as a potential, but to see how creative they are being right now in the way that we are creating not external reality, but our perception, the story we tell. We're storytellers. So we are being creative, whether we know it or not, whether we recognize it or not, through the story we're telling, through what we choose to give our attention to out of all the millions of things that are in front of us, that confirm the story we're telling. So a lot of our work is to help people to recognize how creative they are being already, and then to engage that creativity in being a little bit more intentional about how we want to be in relationship with ourselves, in relationship with our body, in relationship with the animal instinct of our emotions.
So there's the reconnecting with the intuition and the wisdom of the body, and there's also, my sense is, work with narrative. So we are creatures of narrative as well as body. They're sort of linked, kind of two things. Like, have a narrative around the podcast. It might be, hey, there's lots of wonderful embodiment teachers out there, and I want to create a forum to share them and bring them together, and and that narrative I have around this podcast is fairly important in terms of like how I focus my attention and whether it motivates me. And there's a dream that I'm living in, if you will, of what this podcast is, or what my job is, or what my marriage is, right, or what Brighton is where I live. And that dream is creative, even if it's unconsciously creative. And it's pretty bloody important for how I, walk down the street or how I approach my wife. Yes,
absolutely. And these are, and we're making hundreds of choices every day that are unconscious, that basically are confirming our experience of life. And, to be very clear, I'm not saying we're to blame for our own suffering. That would be an extreme version of that. But I'm saying we do have some power in relationship to our own suffering, and we have some tools that we can learn quite quickly to recognize how we are, as you mentioned, that the way you talk to your wife, the way that we talk to each other, the way that the language we use, that we are in a narrative. And our friends in the Amazon, the Achuar people, their invitation to us was, it's great that you come here and learn a little bit about our culture, and help us to protect the rainforest. But the most important thing is you get to work in your own culture, and in their language, change the dream of the North. And what they mean by that is the dominant story that makes it make sense to cut down swathes of rainforest because we need a little bit more petrol for our cars. That there's a story and an assumption about life in that way of life, which is so deeply embedded but which is ultimately proving quite pathological in terms of our own future. So, it becomes more and more important that we start to recognize the narrative that we're in, not just personally, but relationally, and culturally and collectively. And, that's one thing that, movement medicine has, you asked us, you asked a little while ago, well, what's some of the differences between movement medicine and five rhythms? When I was a five rhythms teacher, we were taught, and indeed it was a wonderful thing for many years, dance first, think later.
Mm-hmm.
And don't think. Your thinking is the problem. Your thinking about is the issue. And so I didn't, I danced. And I got into many ecstatic states on the dance floor, and had wonderful times. But then when I got off the dance floor, my thinking kicked back in. My story, my sense of who I was, my sense of what life is, my sense of what the world was still right there waiting for me.
Yeah,
so,
I think there's an anti-mind, if I may jump in, Jakob, I hope you don't mind. There's a sort of anti-mind trend,
Absolutely.
particularly, and that was of time and place. In the West Coast of America, it was get out of your head, body, feel, and there's real benefit to that, and it's really good to be able to re-enter into it. And what I saw that's been the problem coming out of that without engaging language is, one, people are so in the moment, they can be so flowing that there isn't really a way of organizing or planning or getting shit done. Like I see a disorganization in the lives of many conscious dancers, a chaos, and not in a good way, and a difficulty in actually getting it. You have a state, you feel great, everyone fucking hold hands and sighs and says they're grateful at the end of the class. And then the next day, how does that help you in Aldi? How does that help you in the the supermarket? How does that help you like that?
You're describing my experience.
Yeah.
And I was broke. I was brokenhearted. And, once a week I had a great dance and I felt fantastic and free. But there was no connection between the freedom I had on the dance floor and my day-to-day life. And that became completely untenable for me. It's like that's not okay. It's too painful to have that extreme of experience. And it's
a danger in yoga too. People go, they have a nice holiday, they have a state experience, and then they go back to life, and not only is it not better, but now they have a painful contrast. And I see some people solve that by sort of running away and living on a beach in Goa or something. But to me, that never felt like a satisfying solution. Trying to prolong the ecstasy state didn't seem like it.
We have to get to the roots of who we are and self-knowledge. If we don't, and that involves engaging our own narrative, our own internal dialogue, and recognizing what's the story we're telling, and where does that come from, and what effect is it having on my life, on my relationships, on my work, on my capacity to make a difference in this world. And let's face it, we're told the purpose of life is happiness, and all the research shows that the way to happiness is actually having something that you consider to be valuable to offer, and making that offering. That's where contentment lies. It's not in how much I can get. It's in how much I can give in a way that has meaning to me.
I've coached a lot of people on meaning and purpose, and doing something useful to others that builds something meaningful, particularly in a community context. That seems to be kind of central to people's happiness, the quality of the relationships and the meaning of the work they do, rather than states. Because otherwise it's just getting high by other means, right? I've done the drug addict alcoholic thing, and I don't really want to do that by other means. It's the same old game, really, just a little bit healthier.
Yeah, it's a little bit healthier. You're probably not going to be trashed on a Tuesday, but nevertheless, you're right. There's much more. There's so much more potential in the kind of practice that we've developed in movement medicine that's available in so many forms these days. But for the key is then how do I bring the intelligence of my mind into the dance? How do I pay attention to what's going on? How do I be mindful as I'm moving? And at the same time, I'm letting go. I'm letting the body. I'm following the body. But rather than saying I've got to stop thinking, which is, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't work like that. Very occasionally you get these blinding moments of brilliance where the mind is quiet, but most of the time we are thinking, and our thinking is powerful. It's a powerful medicine. So why not engage it? Why not bring it into what we're doing? I'm moving my hand. My hand is connected to my wrist. My wrist is connected to my arm. I'm moving in a body that is intelligent, that is healthy. I'm here. I'm listening to the body. I'm discovering my medicine. I'm discovering who I am. We call it the poetry of presence, so that we engage the mind in movement, and you learn to focus the mind. And once the mind is focused, then what tends to happen is it opens. You described that you get a lot of inspiration. You get your best ideas. And, for me, the best way to do that is focus, focus, focus. And then the mind opens onto a bigger picture. And in that sense, if you bring an issue, a challenge, whether it's to do with business or family life or, something that's going on that's difficult in your life, somebody's unwell, and you bring that experience then to the dance, you're likely to see that in a much wider, deeper context.
Yeah, if nothing else, you're going to start thinking differently when you start moving differently. So through different types of music, you'll have different kinds of thinking. And I like that idea of dancing a question, being sort of very quite loosely in the background, holding a question and then seeing what arises. And it comes in different ways. And I'm realizing as we move towards the end here, I'd love to offer some things to listeners. And first thing I'd say, listeners, if you've never done this kind of dance, go give it a try. You might feel like a plonker for 10 minutes, but then you'll realize no one else is really looking at you, so it doesn't really matter. So that's the first thing I'd say, listeners. Second one, we were talking about resourcing from nature earlier. So that can be another nice practice, is just to ask yourself, how can nature resource me right now? And I mean, in terms of the sort of, if people are already dancing, what's slightly more, maybe you could offer some slightly more advanced experiments or practices.
Yeah, well, just that thing about resourcing from nature. Also, I think it's very important. And this is, one of the things we didn't cover in the basics of shamanism. Shamanism is based on reciprocity. It means that what I receive, I give back. So if I'm receiving something from nature, then there's always the question is what can I offer? So if I'm receiving something from walking in the forest, what can I do? I notice a bit of plastic on the floor. I pick it up, put it in my pocket, recycle it. It's what can I give back? And that's very important, not just in terms of energetically. It's important in terms of recognizing that we make a difference. So it's important in terms of our own empowerment.
Yeah, agency, going, actually, I'm not a victim here. Even if it's just picking up one piece of rubbish, there's something I can do. It's easy to feel.
Make a difference. And we do. We make a difference. We all make a difference. And no action is too small. In terms of, going deeper in the dance, we offer a huge range of really deep practice for helping people to really recognize, become conscious of the story they're telling. We have a process called the Phoenix process, which is all about recognizing the roots of the stories that we tell about ourselves. We call them the understudies. They're the characters on stage that have taken over while the main actor is unwell. But in this case, they've forgotten that they're understudies. They think they're the main actors. And we identify through our story. So these are very deep practices that are actually very step by step. They're not difficult to understand, very powerful, using embodiment, using movement. We also run every summer something we call the Summer Long Dance, which is a 72-hour ceremony. No drugs, no alcohol, no food. In fact, people do drink water, and if fasting's not a good thing for them, there is food made available for people who need it. But we don't stop. There's no pause, and we're dancing really, really deep in order to have a moment just to say thank you, to feel, not because somebody's telling us, but to experience how much life is giving us. What a miracle it is that we're here in the first place, and to say thank you for that. And that ceremony is not just for the individuals in it. It's also raised more than $500,000 for a huge range of really important projects around the world, especially the Pachamama Alliance, who's the central project that we dance for, who who are working to protect the Amazon rainforest. There's a lot of, we also offer online courses in what we call engaged shamanism, which is basically engaged, meaning bring your experience of the exercise, the journey into your day-to-day life, into the way that you sit on the chair, the way you listen to your body, the way you recognize your connection to the earth underneath you, enjoy the wind, enjoy the rain, enjoy the powers of nature. You can find us. I don't know if you'll put up. I will on there. Not everyone will be able to access it, but it'll be on the Embodiment Podcast page. It's schoolofmovementmedicine.com, right? That's right.
And you've also got a book here that I found, which is called Jaguar in the Body, Butterfly in the Heart, and that looks like that's pretty easily find on Amazon and all the rest of it.
That's right, yeah.
Anywhere else people should be going to kind of find you?
You can also check out Darling Khan online. If you're interested in our engaged shamanic work, check out darlingkhan&nbsp.com and you'll find us there too. But if you just, put in Susanna and Yakov, you'll find us in different places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very, very much. The time has flown by, which is always a good sign. If you're ever in Brighton, you're very welcome to come and hang out. And just really, really enjoyed this. It's been super fun. And, you're someone who clearly has a lot of wisdom here. I feel like we need to scratch the surface. So thank you so much. Do you have a final message about the body for all our listeners?
Well, I want you to know, I've been really lucky. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people from so many different cultures, from so many different backgrounds and experiences of life. And I've yet to find somebody who can't find really quite simple and quick access to the creative power that's inside them. So I know that creative power is inside you. I know it. And it's not far away. And as you said, Mark, earlier on, 10 minutes of discomfort for a lifetime of access to a wisdom of the body, heart, and mind joined up that you may not have discovered yet in your life. It's got to be worth 10 minutes of discomfort to just get through that self-consciousness and like, oh my God, what am I doing? Into that, because it's like it's like you've been living in, a small room inside a house and thinking that was your whole house. And then suddenly you find the door and you open up and you go, God, there's a whole house here. And not only that, you open the front door and you see that house exists in a huge landscape. We have so much more access to simple techniques and resources that empower us to recognize our creativity these days, and they're not far away. Wherever you are, they're not far away from you.
Yeah, God, that's beautiful. I really appreciate your trust and faith in all of us. I couldn't support that more. So thank you very much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.